Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jibreel's hands trembled as he scrolled through the ancient manuscript that had arrived at his office 3 days ago. The leather-bound text, supposedly dating back to the 8th century, had been donated anonymously to the Islamic University's rare manuscript collection. What appeared to be standard Quranic commentary had revealed itself as something far more sinister when subjected to computational analysis. The numbers were undeniable. Hidden within the spacing of letters, the arrangement of verses, and the calculated positioning of diacritical marks lay a complex mathematical cipher. Years of training at Langley had taught him to recognize patterns others missed, and his subsequent decades immersed in Islamic scholarship had given him the linguistic foundation to decode what he was seeing. His phone buzzed again. Another message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Dr. Hassan. Some knowledge comes with a price." Through his office window, Jibreel caught glimpses of men in dark clothing positioned strategically around the university courtyard. They weren't trying to hide, quite the opposite. They wanted him to know they were watching. The cipher pointed to coordinates in Jerusalem, specifically the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. According to his calculations, something would happen there in less than 24 hours during the evening prayer. The encoded message spoke of the great deception unveiled and the foundation of faith turned to dust. Jibreel wiped perspiration from his forehead despite the air conditioning. If this prophecy was authentic, if someone was planning to use it to justify an attack on one of Islam's holiest sites, the resulting chaos would ignite conflicts across the Middle East. Millions would suffer. But authentication was the problem. The manuscript felt ancient. The ink composition matched historical samples, and the parchment bore all the hallmarks of 8th century production. Yet the mathematical sophistication of the hidden code suggested knowledge that shouldn't have existed 13 centuries ago. His computer chimed with an incoming encrypted email. The sender's address was a string of random characters, but the message was brief and chilling, you understand now why the Order has protected this secret for so long. Join us, or watch everything burn. Jibreel's blood ran cold. The Order, he'd encountered whispers of them during his intelligence years. A shadowy organization that claimed to trace its origins back to the early Islamic expansion, supposedly guardians of hidden knowledge that could reshape religious understanding. Most analysts dismissed them as conspiracy theory fodder, but Jibreel had always suspected there was more to the story. A knock at his office door made him freeze. Through the frosted glass, he could see 2 silhouettes. Dr. Hassan, a woman's voice, accented but speaking fluent Arabic. "We need to speak with you about your recent research." Jibreel quickly copied his files to an encrypted drive and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He closed his laptop and moved toward the window, considering his options. His office was on the 3rd floor, but there was a maintenance ladder that led to the adjacent building's roof. "Doctor, we know you're in there. This conversation is inevitable." The door handle turned slowly, unlocked. He'd forgotten to secure it in his excitement over the discovery. A rookie mistake that might cost him everything. As the door opened, Jibreel was already climbing through the window. The evening call to prayer provided perfect cover as hundreds of voices joined in unison across the city. He dropped onto the fire escape, his 53-year-old joints protesting the sudden movement. Behind him, he heard rapid footsteps and urgent voices speaking in what sounded like English. American operatives? Had his former colleagues been tracking his work? The sun was setting over Medina's ancient minarets as Jibreel reached street level. He had less than 24 hours to reach Jerusalem and determine whether a 13-century-old prophecy was about to reshape the modern world. The question that haunted him as he disappeared into the evening crowd was whether he was racing to prevent a catastrophe or walking directly into a trap that had been set centuries before his birth. The call to Fajr echoed across Cairo as Dr. Yusuf Hassan's trembling fingers traced the ancient manuscript one more time. The pre-dawn light filtering through his study window seemed to mock him. another hour closer to whatever catastrophe the hidden message foretold. Sleep had eluded him entirely, his mind churning through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. He had spent the remaining hours of the night cross-referencing the numerical patterns he'd discovered, comparing them against historical events, astronomical calculations, and every scholarly interpretation he could access. The mathematical precision was undeniable. The message wasn't metaphorical or symbolic, it was a countdown, and it pointed to today. The manuscript before him was a 14th century copy of the Qur'an, donated to the university by a wealthy collector who claimed it had been in his family for generations. Yusuf had been studying its unique calligraphy when he noticed the irregularities, subtle variations in letter spacing that seemed random until he applied numerical analysis. What emerged was a pattern so complex, so deliberately hidden, that it could only have been placed there intentionally. His phone buzzed. A text from his research assistant, Layla. Dr. Hassan, the manuscript's provenance files are missing from the archives. Security says someone accessed them yesterday. Yusuf's blood chilled. He immediately called her back. Layla, where are you now? At home, but I can come in? No. Stay away from the university today. Don't come in at all. Professor, what's wrong? You sound... Promise me you'll stay home. After a moment's hesitation, she agreed. Yusuf ended the call and stared at the manuscript. Someone else knew about this. Someone had been watching, waiting. He photographed every page with his phone, then carefully wrapped the manuscript in protective cloth. Whatever was coming, he couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. The streets of Cairo were already bustling with morning traffic as Yusuf made his way to the Grand Mosque. If anyone could help him understand the religious implications of what he'd found, it would be Imam Abdullah Rashid, his former mentor and one of the most respected Islamic scholars in the region. The Imam was in his 70s now, his beard white as fresh cotton, but his eyes remained sharp as obsidian. He listened in silence as Yusuf explained his discovery, occasionally asking for clarification on the mathematical sequences. "Show me," the Imam said finally. Yusuf unwrapped the manuscript on the Imam's desk. Together, they bent over the ancient pages as Yusuf pointed out the hidden patterns. The Imam's expression grew increasingly grave. "There are legends," the Imam whispered, "stories passed down through certain scholarly lineages. They speak of hidden knowledge, preserved by those who believe the end times would require preparation." "What kind of preparation?" "The legends vary. Some say it was knowledge to prevent catastrophe. Others claim it was instructions to ensure certain prophecies came to pass." The Imam's weathered hands hovered over the manuscript. "This calligraphy style, I've seen references to it before. There was a secretive order of scholars in medieval Andalusia before the Reconquista. They called themselves the Guardians of the Final Revelation." "The Guardians?" "They believed they were chosen to preserve divine secrets until the appointed time. When Granada fell, they scattered across the Islamic world, taking their knowledge with them." Yusuf felt a chill of recognition. The collector who donated this manuscript, his family fled Andalusia in 1492. The Imam nodded grimly. "It's possible this has been passed down through his lineage for centuries, waiting for someone with your particular expertise to decode it. But why now? Why today?" Before the Imam could answer, Yusuf's phone rang. An unknown number. "Professor Hassan." The voice was cultured, speaking Arabic with a slight Andalusian accent that made Yusuf's skin crawl. "I believe you've found something that belongs to me. Who is this?" "Someone who has been very patient. My family has waited 5 centuries for this day, Professor. We know you've decoded the message." Yusuf looked at the Imam, who was listening intently. "What do you want?" "What's rightfully ours. The manuscript and your complete research. You have 2 hours to bring both to the citadel of Saladin. Come alone. And if I refuse, then you'll spend your final hours wondering if you could have prevented what's coming." The line went dead. Yusuf stared at his phone, his mind racing. The Imam placed a gnarled hand on his shoulder. There's something else about the Guardians you should know. They didn't just preserve prophecies, they orchestrated them. If this man's family truly descends from that order, then today's catastrophe may not be something they're trying to prevent. You think they're trying to fulfill it? I think, my young friend, that you may have stumbled into something that was set in motion long before either of us was born. Yusuf looked down at the manuscript, understanding with growing horror that he had less than 2 hours to decide the fate of everything he held sacred. The fluorescent lights of the university library hummed overhead as Dr. Yusuf Mansouri spread ancient manuscripts across the mahogany table. His hands trembled slightly as he traced the Arabic calligraphy with his finger, cross-referencing the hidden numerical patterns he'd discovered in the Qur'an with historical texts that dated back over a millennium. The pattern was undeniable. Every 127 verses, when read diagonally across specific surahs, formed a secondary text, a warning embedded within the sacred words like a message in a bottle cast into the ocean of time. But this wasn't just any prophecy. The mathematical precision was staggering, as if whoever had encoded this message possessed knowledge that transcended their era. "Impossible," he whispered, but the evidence stared back at him from the yellowed pages. The hidden text spoke of a convergence, a moment when celestial alignments would unlock something that had been deliberately sealed away. And according to his calculations, that moment was less than 23 hours away. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Professor Mansouri, we need to talk. The coffee shop on 5th Street. Come alone. You're not the first to find the pattern." Yusuf's blood ran cold. He'd told no one about his discovery, had barely begun to process it himself. He looked around the empty library, suddenly aware of every shadow, every creak of the old building settling. The security camera in the corner seemed to watch him with mechanical interest. 15 minutes later, he sat in the dimly lit cafe, nursing a cup of Turkish coffee that had long since grown cold. The woman who approached his table was not what he'd expected. She appeared to be in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and wearing a simple black coat. Her eyes, however, held the weight of someone who had seen far too much. "Dr. Mansouri," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "My name is Layla Osman. I represent a group that has been watching for someone like you for a very long time. Watching for what, exactly? For someone brilliant enough to find the pattern, but hopefully wise enough to understand what it means." She placed a leather portfolio on the table between them. "Tell me, in your research, did you discover who embedded the message?" Yusuf hesitated. The mathematical complexity suggests it couldn't have been created during the 7th century. The astronomical calculations alone would have required knowledge that wouldn't exist for another 1,000 years, Layla finished. "Yes, that's because it wasn't created then. It was preserved then." She opened the portfolio, revealing photographs of ancient documents, star charts, and what appeared to be architectural blueprints. "The message you found is part of a warning system, Dr. Mansouri, a safeguard left by a civilization that witnessed something catastrophic and wanted to ensure future generations would be prepared." "What kind of catastrophe?" Layla's expression darkened, the kind that erases civilizations from history, leaving only whispers and legends behind. But more importantly, the kind that can be prevented if the right actions are taken at the precise moment. Yusuf studied the photographs. One showed a stone tablet covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as he looked at them. Another depicted what looked like a map of underground tunnels beneath major world cities.
"You're talking about something that happened thousands of years ago."
"I'm talking about something that happens in cycles. Every few millennia, when certain astronomical conditions align, a door opens. Most of the time, nothing comes through, but sometimes..." She pulled out a newspaper clipping dated 3 years earlier. The headline read, "Massive sinkhole swallows entire village in Romania. No survivors found." "The previous cycle was incomplete," she continued. "The conditions weren't quite right, so only a small opening occurred. But tomorrow night, Dr. Mansouri, The full convergence happens, and this time someone has been preparing. Preparing how? Artifacts have been stolen from museums worldwide over the past decade. Ancient texts have disappeared from private collections. Someone has been gathering the keys needed to not just open the door, but to keep it open permanently. Yusuf felt the room spinning slightly. This is insane. You're talking about some kind of supernatural... I'm talking about science we don't yet understand. Technology so advanced it appears magical to us. Layla leaned forward. The same technology that allowed someone to encode warnings in religious texts with mathematical precision that still astounds us today. A barista dropped a cup behind the counter, and Yusuf jumped. The sound echoed in the nearly empty cafe like a gunshot. Layla checked her watch. We have 22 hours, Dr. Mansouri. 22 hours to locate the convergence point and prevent someone from unleashing something that could make the Romania incident look like a minor tremor. She stood, gathering the portfolio. The question is, will you help us, or will you go home and pretend none of this is real? Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Yusuf realized with mounting dread that pretending was no longer an option. The ancient leather binding cracked under Dr. Yusuf Hamidi's trembling fingers as he opened the manuscript in the restricted archives beneath Al-Azhar University. The air tasted of dust and centuries-old secrets. Above him, Cairo's morning call to prayer echoed through the stone corridors, but down here in the depths, time seemed suspended. The manuscript before him was older than anything he'd seen in 20 years of Islamic scholarship, its Arabic script flowing in patterns that predated standardized calligraphy by centuries. According to the catalogue, it had been discovered in a sealed chamber beneath the ruins of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, rescued moments before ISIS dynamited the site. His hands shook as he photographed each page with his phone, the flash illuminating text that seemed to pulse with hidden meaning. The numerical patterns he'd discovered in the Qur'an weren't random. They were a key, and this manuscript might hold the lock they were meant to open. The door behind him creaked open. Yusuf spun around to find Dr. Amira Hassan, the archive's chief curator, watching him with concern etched across her weathered face. "You look terrible, Yusuf. When did you last sleep?" "Sleep?" He laughed, the sound echoing off stone walls. "Amira, I think I've found something that could change everything we understand about divine revelation." She stepped closer, her hijab rustling softly. "Or it could destroy your career. These manuscripts," she gestured at the ancient text, "they're dangerous territory. The university board is already questioning your recent research directions." Yusuf's phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. "And time grows short, Dr. Hamidi. Others seek what you have found. Trust no one." "Who else has access to these archives?" he asked suddenly. Amira frowned. "The usual academic researchers, some government officials." "Why?" Before he could answer, footsteps echoed from the corridor above. Heavy boots on stone, not the soft shuffle of scholars or the measured pace of security guards. These were military footsteps, purposeful and urgent. "We need to leave," Yusuf whispered, carefully closing the manuscript. "Now." "Yusuf, you're frightening me. What's going on?" The footsteps were descending now, accompanied by voices speaking in clipped professional Arabic. Yusuf grabbed Amira's hand and pulled her toward the archive's rear exit, a maintenance tunnel that connected to the university's old aqueduct system. As they hurried through the narrow passage, Amira's flashlight beam dancing ahead of them, Yusuf's mind raced through the patterns he'd discovered. The numerical sequences weren't just hidden in the Qur'an. They were coordinates, timestamps, and something else. Something that felt like a countdown. They emerged in the university's old courtyard, dawn light filtering through the minaret shadows. Students were beginning to gather for morning lectures, their voices a comforting reminder of normal life continuing around them. "My office," Amira said. "We can talk there safely." But as they crossed the courtyard, Yusuf spotted them. 3 men in dark suits standing near the main entrance. their eyes scanning the crowd with predatory intensity. One of them spoke into a radio, his gaze sweeping directly over Yusuf's position. "They're here for me," he realized. "Who?" "Yusuf, you're not making sense." He pulled out his phone and showed her the threatening messages. "Someone knows about my research. Someone who's been waiting for me to find these patterns." Amira's face paled as she read. "This mentions the manuscript by name, but it was only catalogued yesterday, and access records are restricted." A terrible understanding began to dawn. Unless someone has been tracking this manuscript for longer than we know, much longer. His phone buzzed again. "And the faithful have guarded these secrets for 800 years. What you call discovery, we call destiny. Come to the Mosque of Ibn Tulun. Come alone, bring your research. You have until sunset to understand your role in what must unfold." Yusuf looked up to find the men in suits moving toward them across the courtyard, their pace quickening. Other figures emerged from different directions, a coordinated net closing around them. "There's something else," he told Amira urgently. "The countdown I found, it ends in 18 hours. Whatever this prophecy refers to, it's not just some historical curiosity. Someone is planning to make it happen." "What kind of prophecy?" "The kind that brings down civilizations." The lead operative was 50 meters away now, his hand moving inside his jacket. Yusuf grabbed Amira's arm and pulled her toward the university's main library, where crowds of students would provide cover. As they ran, weaving between startled academics and book-laden scholars, Yusuf couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn into something vast and ancient, a plan that had been in motion since before he was born. The mysterious messages weren't threats, they were invitations. And despite every rational instinct screaming at him to run, to hide, to forget everything he discovered, Yusuf found himself calculating the fastest route to the Mosque of Ibn Tulun. Time was running out, and somehow he knew that running away would only make the coming catastrophe worse. The fluorescent lights of the university library cast harsh shadows across Dr. Yusuf Hassan's weathered face as he hunched over ancient manuscripts, his fingers trembling slightly as he turned each delicate page. The cryptographic patterns he'd discovered in the Qur'an kept evolving, revealing layers of meaning that seemed to shift like smoke whenever he thought he'd grasped their significance. 22 hours remained. His phone buzzed against the wooden table, startling him from his concentration. The caller ID showed his research assistant, Amira, but when he answered, her voice carried an edge of panic he'd never heard before. "Professor, someone broke into your office. They didn't take anything, but they photographed everything. Your notes, your computer screen, even the books you left open." Yusuf's blood ran cold. "How do you know they photographed everything?" "Because I was still here, working late in the adjacent lab. I saw the camera flashes through the frosted glass. By the time security arrived, whoever it was had vanished through the emergency exit." He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of invisible eyes watching him. "Amira, listen carefully. Don't go home tonight. Stay with friends somewhere unexpected. And don't tell anyone where you're going. Professor, you're scaring me. What's happening?" Before he could answer, a shadow fell across his table. Yusuf looked up to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit standing nearby, his pale blue eyes reflecting the harsh library lighting. The stranger's presence felt wrong somehow, as if he didn't quite belong in this century. "Dr. Hassan, I presume." The man's accent was unplaceable, carrying hints of various European influences. "My name is Marcus Aldrich. I believe we have much to discuss." Yusuf kept his phone pressed to his ear. "Amira, remember what I said. Go now." He ended the call and studied the intruder. "The library is closed to visitors at this hour." "Ah, but I'm not exactly a visitor." Aldrich pulled out a chair and sat down, uninvited. "I represent certain interests that have been monitoring your recent discoveries. Fascinating work, really, though I suspect you've only scratched the surface." "I don't know what you're talking about." Aldrich smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too white, too perfect. the numerical sequences hidden in the Meccan verses, the astronomical alignments that shouldn't exist in 7th century text, the countdown that ends tomorrow at sunset. He leaned forward. "Shall I continue?" The manuscript pages suddenly felt heavier in Yusuf's hands. "Who are you?" "I represent an organization that has been preparing for this moment for over 13 centuries. We've been waiting, watching, ensuring that when the time came, we would be ready." Aldrich reached into his jacket and withdrew a leather-bound journal. "This belonged to my predecessor's predecessor. See the date?" Yusuf examined the faded inscription, 1187 CE, the year Saladin recaptured Jerusalem. "This is impossible." "Is it? Your own research proves that knowledge can transcend time when properly encoded. We've simply been the custodians of that knowledge, passing it down through carefully selected generations." The pieces began forming a terrifying picture in Yusuf's mind. "You've known about the prophecy all along." "Known about it? Dr. Hassan, we've been orchestrating it." Aldrich opened the ancient journal, revealing pages covered in the same cryptographic patterns Yusuf had discovered. "The message you found wasn't just a prediction, it was an instruction manual." Yusuf's chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly. "You're insane. The Qur'an doesn't contain instructions for destruction, doesn't it? What about the verses concerning the Day of Judgment, the splitting of the moon, the rolling up of the heavens like a scroll?" Aldrich's voice remained maddeningly calm. "Poetry to most, but precise coordinates and timing to those who understand the code. Even if that were true, why would you want to fulfill such a prophecy? Because sometimes the old world must be swept away for the new one to emerge. The prophecy speaks of catastrophe, yes, but also of revelation. Those who survive will witness the dawn of a new age of understanding." Yusuf backed away from the table, his mind racing. "You're talking about mass murder. I'm talking about evolution. The prophecy will fulfill itself with or without our intervention. We're simply ensuring that the right people are in position to guide humanity through the transition." The library's emergency lighting suddenly activated, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Somewhere in the distance, Yusuf heard the click of locks engaging automatically. "I'm afraid you won't be leaving just yet, Dr. Hassan. We need your expertise to complete the final calculations. The prophecy requires a true believer to unlock its ultimate secret." Aldrich stood slowly, his shadow stretching across the ancient texts. "You see, we've spent centuries preparing for this moment, but we never possessed what you have, genuine faith combined with scholarly understanding. You're the key we've been waiting for." Yusuf realized with growing horror that his discovery hadn't been an accident. He'd been guided, manipulated, led to this moment like a lamb to slaughter. The question now was whether he could find a way to turn the predator into prey before time ran out. 21 hours and counting. The weight of centuries pressed down on Hassan as he descended into the basement archive beneath the Al-Azhar library. Each step echoed hollowly in the narrow stone corridor, lit only by flickering fluorescent bulbs that cast dancing shadows on the ancient walls. Sister Miriam walked beside him, her breathing shallow in the confined space. "The manuscript you're looking for was catalogued in 1847, she whispered, consulting a leather-bound ledger. "But according to these records, it was never supposed to leave this vault." Hassan's pulse quickened. If the text had been deliberately hidden, it meant someone centuries ago had understood its significance. How many people know about this collection? Perhaps a dozen scholars worldwide. The Church guards these documents carefully. They contain some of the earliest Islamic texts ever discovered, predating even the compilation of the Qur'an itself. They reached a heavy oak door reinforced with iron bands. Sister Miriam produced an ornate key, its metal worn smooth by countless hands. The lock turned with surprising ease, as if it had been used recently. The archive beyond took Hassan's breath away. Towering shelves stretched into darkness, filled with manuscripts, scrolls, and codices that spanned over a millennium. The air was thick with the scent of parchment and preservation chemicals. Climate control units hummed softly, maintaining the precise conditions needed to keep these treasures from crumbling to dust. "Here," Sister Miriam said, leading him to a glass case in the chamber's center. Inside lay a manuscript unlike any Hassan had ever seen. The parchment was darker than usual, almost black, with silver script that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. The Codex Umbra, Shadow Codex. Hassan leaned closer, his scholar's eye immediately recognizing the archaic Arabic script. But there was something else, symbols interwoven between the lines that belonged to no alphabet he knew. This is extraordinary. When was it written? Carbon dating suggests the 7th century, possibly earlier. But Hassan, she hesitated, glancing around the empty archive. There's something you need to know. 3 days ago, someone else requested access to this manuscript. The words hit him like a physical blow. Who? A man claiming to be from the Islamic Research Institute in Cairo. He had proper credentials, spoke fluent Arabic, and seemed to know exactly what he was looking for. She unlocked the case with trembling fingers, but after he left, we discovered something troubling. He photographed certain pages, the same sections that contain those unusual symbols. Hassan's mind raced. Someone was ahead of him, had been preparing for this moment. Do you have security footage? We do. I'll arrange for you to see it. Sister Miriam carefully lifted the manuscript from its case. But first, you should read this. The man spent most of his time on pages 47 through 51. She opened to the specified section, and Hassan felt his blood turn to ice. The text described a ritual of astronomical alignment, written in the same archaic style as the Quranic passage he'd discovered. But this was far more detailed, containing specific instructions for something called the convergence. When the hidden verse reveals itself to the worthy scholar, Hassan translated aloud, and the moon obscures the sun's light, the faithful must gather at the first house to open the gate of shadows. Only through willing sacrifice can the prophecy be fulfilled and the world be cleansed for the righteous. Sister Miriam crossed herself. The first house, that refers to the Kaaba in Mecca, doesn't it? Hassan nodded grimly. Tomorrow's solar eclipse would be visible across the Middle East, with totality occurring directly over Saudi Arabia. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. This isn't just a prophecy, it's an instruction manual. He continued reading, his Arabic education allowing him to pass the archaic grammar. The text described a gathering of believers who would use the eclipse's power to open what it called a passage between worlds. The language was metaphorical, but the intent was clear: mass destruction on a scale that would fundamentally alter the balance of global power. Hassan, Sister Miriam's voice was barely audible. Look at the final passage. His eyes moved to the bottom of the page, where a different hand had added a note in more modern Arabic. The guardian awaits the scholar's arrival. When understanding dawns, the true test begins. Seek the cave of Hira at the moment of totality. The cave of Hira, where the Prophet Muhammad had received his first revelation. Hassan's hands shook as the implications crystallized. Someone had been watching for centuries, waiting for a scholar capable of deciphering the hidden message. Every step of his journey had been anticipated, perhaps even orchestrated. I need to see that security footage immediately, he said, closing the manuscript carefully. And then I need to get to Mecca. Sister Miriam was already moving toward the archive door. There's something else. The man who was here, before he left, he asked specifically about you. He wanted to know if Dr. Hassan al-Rashid had ever visited our collection. The words chilled Hassan to his core. His mysterious adversary wasn't just ahead of him. They had been expecting him all along. The warehouse stood like a monument to abandonment in the industrial district, its broken windows catching the first pale light of dawn. Dr. Hassan Malik pressed himself against the rusted metal siding, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. 18 hours remained. Through a gap in the corrugated wall, he could see movement inside, shadows dancing in the amber glow of portable work lights. The sound of machinery hummed beneath hushed voices speaking in Arabic, though the dialect was unfamiliar, archaic somehow. His phone buzzed with another message from Layla, but he couldn't risk the screen's glow giving away his position. The drive here had taken 3 hours, following coordinates embedded in the manuscript's margin notes, numbers he'd initially dismissed as scribal errors until the pattern revealed itself. Now, crouched in the pre-dawn darkness outside what appeared to be the epicenter of an ancient conspiracy, those same numbers felt like breadcrumbs leading him deeper into a labyrinth he barely understood. A door creaked open on the warehouse's far side. Hassan crept along the perimeter, staying low behind abandoned shipping containers. 2 figures emerged, both wearing dark clothing that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the weak morning light. They spoke in that same ancient Arabic, but Hassan caught fragments, references to the awakening and the final seal. His blood turned to ice. The final seal. The manuscript had mentioned 7 seals, each corresponding to a different epoch in Islamic history. If these people were discussing the 7th and final seal, then everything he'd translated was not prophecy but blueprint. The figures separated, one heading toward a black sedan, while the other returned inside. Hassan seized his chance, following the building's perimeter until he found a loading dock with a partially raised door. He slipped underneath, immediately hit by the overwhelming scent of sulfur and something else, something organic and wrong. The warehouse interior opened into a vast space divided by hanging plastic sheets. Work lights cast harsh shadows across tables laden with electronic equipment, chemical apparatus, and open books. Hassan recognized several texts from his own research, rare manuscripts that should have been in museums or private collections, not scattered across makeshift laboratory benches. But it was the wall that made his knees buckle. Stretching across the entire back wall was a massive reproduction of the manuscript pages he'd been translating, blown up to enormous proportions. Red lines connected various passages, creating a web of relationships he hadn't seen in the original. Mathematical formulas filled the spaces between verses, and astronomical charts marked with today's date covered every available surface. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said behind him. Hassan spun around to find a woman in her 60s, her silver hair pulled back severely, her dark eyes holding an intelligence that seemed to pierce straight through him. She wore simple black clothing, but something about her bearing suggested authority beyond anything earned in this lifetime. "Dr. Malik," she continued in accented English, "we've been expecting you. Who are you?" Hassan's voice came out as barely a whisper. "My name is Safiya al-Kindi. My family has been guardians of this knowledge for 37 generations." She gestured toward the wall of text. "Your translation work has been adequate, but you've only seen the surface." Hassan's mind raced. Al-Kindi, the same surname as the 9th century philosopher who'd first encoded the prophecy. This is impossible. No organization could maintain continuity for over 1,000 years. Safiya smiled, and the expression held no warmth. "Faith, Dr. Malik. Faith and purpose. When you know with absolute certainty that you serve a divine plan, centuries become merely stepping stones." She led him closer to the wall, pointing to passages he'd struggled to translate. "You focused on the what, but missed the why. This isn't a prophecy to be prevented, it's a protocol to be executed. The catastrophic event you're so desperate to stop, it's already begun, has been beginning for centuries. The hidden message was hidden only from those lacking the proper context." Safiya's finger traced lines connecting different manuscript pages. Every major crisis in Islamic history, every moment of perceived weakness has been preparation, building pressure, creating the exact conditions necessary for what happens in, she checked an ornate pocket watch, 17 hours and 43 minutes. Hassan backed away, his translator's mind finally grasping the true scope of what he'd uncovered. "You're talking about deliberate manipulation of historical events. Wars, crusades, the fall of empires, all necessary, all foretold, all executed by those wise enough to see beyond the immediate suffering to the greater purpose." Safiya's eyes gleamed with fanatical certainty. "And now, Dr. Malik, you have a choice. join us in witnessing the culmination of our ancestors' work, or—" She didn't need to finish the threat. Hassan could see it in the shadows moving behind the plastic sheets, could hear it in the purposeful footsteps approaching from multiple directions. His phone buzzed again. Layla's message burned in his pocket, unanswered. Time was running out faster than he'd imagined. The ancient manuscript crackled between Dr. Khalil's trembling fingers as he spread it across the mahogany table in Professor Mansouri's private study. The parchment, yellowed with age and delicate as butterfly wings, bore the unmistakable seal of the Abbasid Caliphate, a crimson wax impression that had somehow survived 8 centuries. "This changes everything," Mansouri whispered, his weathered face pale in the lamplight. "Where did you find this?" "Hidden behind a false panel in the Alexandria collection. The custodian said it had been there since before the revolution." Khalil's voice was hoarse from exhaustion. 22 hours had passed since his discovery, and the weight of impending catastrophe pressed against his chest like a physical force. The manuscript contained a detailed astronomical chart, its margins filled with elegant Arabic script that seemed to dance in the flickering light. But it was the central diagram that made both men's blood run cold, a precise calculation showing the alignment of celestial bodies that would occur in exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes. "The Brotherhood of the Hidden Star," Mansouri read aloud, tracing the ornate calligraphy with a trembling finger. "I thought they were merely legend." Khalil leaned closer, studying the intricate mathematical formulas that spiraled around the edges of the parchment.
According to this, they've been preparing for 9 centuries.
"Look at these dates. They mark every significant calamity in Islamic history. The fall of Baghdad, the Reconquista, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And they've been orchestrating them?" The professor's voice cracked with disbelief. "Not orchestrating, predicting and profiting." Khalil pointed to a series of symbols that repeated throughout the text. "These aren't just astronomical markers. They're economic indicators, financial positions taken generations in advance." The room fell silent, except for the steady tick of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. Outside, Cairo's traffic hummed through the night, oblivious to the revelation unfolding in the cramped study. Mansouri pulled out a magnifying glass, examining the manuscript's watermark. "This paper, it's not medieval. The weave is wrong, the chemical composition." His face went ashen. "Khalil, this document was created within the last 50 years. The implications hit like a physical blow. If the manuscript was modern, then someone contemporary had access to the original Brotherhood's knowledge. Someone who knew exactly what would happen tonight." Khalil's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. The words on the screen made his stomach lurch. "The scholar has found our gift. Come to the Citadel. Come alone. You have 90 minutes before the stars align." "They know we're here," Khalil said, showing Mansouri the message. "We have to—" The lights cut out, plunging them into absolute darkness. Emergency lighting should have kicked in immediately, but the backup system remained dead. In the silence, they heard the soft whisper of footsteps in the corridor outside. Mansouri's hand found Khalil's arm in the darkness. "The back entrance," he whispered. "Through the garden." They moved carefully through the cluttered study, navigating by memory and touch. The manuscript crinkled as Khalil folded it into his jacket pocket. Behind them, the footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the soft metallic click of weapons being readied. The garden door opened with a barely audible creak. Cool night air rushed over them as they slipped into the shadows between towering date palms. The city's glow provided just enough light to reveal the narrow path that wound through the professor's carefully tended roses and jasmine. "My car is parked 3 blocks away," Mansouri breathed. "If we can reach—" A spotlight blazed to life, cutting through the darkness like a sword. Voices shouted in Arabic, then English, then what sounded like medieval Persian. The Brotherhood's reach extended far beyond what either man had imagined. They ran, abandoning stealth for speed. Thorns tore at their clothes as they crashed through the garden's maze of pathways. Behind them, the pursuit grew louder, multiple teams converging from different directions. The garden wall loomed ahead, its ancient stones slick with dew. Mansouri, despite his age, scaled it with surprising agility. Khalil followed, his academic lifestyle making the climb a struggle. His jacket caught on the wall's iron spikes, and he heard the manuscript tear. They dropped into the alley beyond just as armed figures appeared at the garden door. The narrow space between buildings offered temporary concealment, but Khalil knew it wouldn't last long. These people had been planning for centuries. They would have contingencies for every possible escape route. "The Citadel," he said, pulling out his phone to call a taxi. "We have to go there. It's obviously a trap." "Everything's a trap now, but it's also our only chance to stop whatever they've planned." Khalil looked up at the star-filled sky, calculating the time remaining. "In 73 minutes, either we prevent a catastrophe or become part of one that's been 900 years in the making." The taxi's headlights cut through the darkness as it rounded the corner, and both men knew they were racing toward a confrontation that would determine the fate of millions. The ancient stone steps beneath the Al-Azhar Mosque groaned under their weight as Ahmad led Sarah deeper into the subterranean chambers. The beam of his flashlight cut through darkness that had remained undisturbed for centuries, illuminating walls covered in intricate Arabic calligraphy that seemed to shimmer in the moving light. "These passages weren't built for the mosque," Ahmad whispered, his voice echoing off the narrow walls. "They're much older. Pre-Islamic, possibly Roman." Sarah pressed close behind him, her breathing shallow in the musty air. "How did you know about this place?" "My grandfather brought me here once when I was 12. He said it was where the true guardians kept their most sacred secrets." Ahmad paused at a junction where 3 tunnels converged. "He made me swear never to tell anyone, but I think he knew this day would come." They chose the center passage, following a series of carved symbols that matched the marginalia from the ancient Qur'an. The tunnel sloped downward, and Ahmad could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on them. Somewhere above, Cairo continued its eternal dance of chaos and prayer, unaware that beneath their feet lay answers to questions that had plagued Islamic scholars for over a millennium. The passage opened into a circular chamber, its domed ceiling supported by 12 columns. Each column bore inscriptions in multiple languages, Arabic, Hebrew, Latin, and scripts Ahmad couldn't immediately identify. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal holding what appeared to be an ornate brass astrolabe, its intricate mechanism still gleaming despite the accumulated dust. "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed, approaching the device cautiously. Ahmad studied the surrounding walls, his flashlight revealing a continuous narrative carved into the stone. "This tells a story," he said, tracing the ancient Arabic with his finger, "about a group of scholars, Christians, Jews, and Muslims who discovered something in their respective texts, something that terrified them." Sarah bent over the astrolabe, careful not to touch its delicate mechanisms. "The alignments here, they're not astronomical, they're temporal. Look at these inscriptions, they're dates." Ahmad joined her, and his blood chilled as he recognized the numerology. "These are all historical catastrophes. The fall of Baghdad to the Mongols, the Black Death, the destruction of the Library of Alexandria." He looked up at her. "They're all connected to specific celestial alignments, just like the one happening tomorrow." A sound echoed from the tunnel behind them, footsteps, measured and deliberate. Ahmad grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her behind one of the columns as voices drifted into the chamber. "Waited 700 years for this moment," a man's voice said in accented English. "The scholar has served his purpose admirably." Another voice, younger and nervous. "What if he deciphers too much? What if he tries to stop it?" "He cannot stop what was set in motion centuries ago," the first voice replied. "The sequence has begun. By tomorrow's sunset, the revelation will reshape the world's understanding of divine truth." Ahmad pressed himself against the cold stone, his mind racing. Through a gap between the columns he could see 3 figures entering the chamber. The leader was tall and gaunt, wearing the robes of a senior cleric, but his bearing suggested military training. The other two flanked him like bodyguards. "The custodian will be pleased," the leader continued, approaching the astrolabe. "When the event occurs, the faithful will look for guidance. They will need someone to interpret the signs, to explain what God has revealed through fire and devastation." Sarah's hand found Ahmad's in the darkness, her grip tight with fear. He squeezed back, trying to convey silent reassurance, while his own terror threatened to overwhelm him. The leader reached into his robes and withdrew a small metallic device, placing it carefully beside the astrolabe. "Set the charges for 2 hours," he instructed. "We cannot allow anyone else to discover this place. The knowledge here must die with the old world." Ahmad's heart hammered against his ribs. These weren't religious extremists seeking to fulfill prophecy. They were orchestrating catastrophe and positioning themselves to control the aftermath. The hidden message in the Qur'an wasn't a warning, it was a timer, counting down to an event they had planned. As the men prepared to leave, the leader paused, his head turning slowly toward their hiding place. "Dr. Al-Mansouri," he called out, his voice carrying unsettling calm. "I know you're here. Your grandfather was stubborn too. It didn't end well for him." Ahmad felt the world shift beneath him. His grandfather's death hadn't been natural. These people had killed him to protect their secret. Now they were using Ahmad himself as an unwitting instrument in their plan. The chamber fell silent except for the soft ticking of the device they'd left behind. Ahmad counted heartbeats, waiting until he was certain they were alone before emerging from behind the column. 2 hours until the chamber would be destroyed, and less than 18 until whatever catastrophe they'd engineered would begin. The safe house felt like a tomb. Dr. Amara stared at the ancient manuscript spread across the table, its yellowed pages seeming to mock him in the lamplight. 9 hours had passed since his escape from the library, and the cryptic message felt no clearer than when he'd first discovered it. The countdown in his mind had become a relentless drumbeat, 15 hours remaining. Layla paced behind him, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke in rapid Arabic to contacts across the Middle East. Her network of archaeological colleagues had proven invaluable, but so far their combined efforts had yielded only fragments and theories. "The linguistic patterns don't match any known dialect from the period," she said, ending her call. "Professor Al-Mansouri in Cairo thinks the text might be using a deliberately obscured cipher, something designed to hide meaning even from scholars of its time." Amara rubbed his tired eyes. The weight of potential catastrophe pressed down on him like a physical force. "We're missing something fundamental." The message spoke of the breaking of the seventh seal and when the moon drinks the sun's blood. Those aren't random metaphors. A sharp knock at the door froze them both. 3 quick raps, followed by 2, then 1, the signal Marcus had established. Layla moved to the window, peering through the blinds before unlocking the door. Marcus entered with a laptop bag and grim expression. "We've got problems. Someone leaked your description to every security agency in 3 countries. The official story is you're wanted for questioning about stolen artifacts, but my sources say the order came from much higher up. The custodians," Amara said grimly. "That's not all." Marcus opened his laptop and pulled up a news feed. "Look at this." The screen showed aerial footage of a remote archaeological site in Jordan. Emergency vehicles surrounded what appeared to be a collapsed excavation. The reporter's voice carried an undertone of confusion as she described the sudden sinkhole that had swallowed an entire dig site. "This happened 3 hours ago," Marcus said. "Official reports blame structural instability, but listen to this." He clicked to another tab, revealing a recorded phone call. A panicked voice spoke in accented English. The ground just opened up, like something was pulling it down from below. And the sound, God help me, it was like the earth was screaming. Layla moved closer to the screen. "Where exactly in Jordan?" Marcus highlighted coordinates on a map, about 40 kilometers from where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. But here's the interesting part. Geological surveys show the area has been completely stable for thousands of years. Amara felt ice form in his stomach. He pulled out his translation notes, scanning through the fragmented text he'd been working on. The manuscript mentions 7 wounds in the earth that will open before the final revelation. What if this isn't metaphorical? You think whatever's supposed to happen is causing actual geological events? Layla asked. Before Amara could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed with an urgent alert. His face paled as he read. Another site just collapsed. This one in Turkey near ancient Harran. He pulled up fresh footage showing a similar scene of devastation. And there are reports of ground tremors at 5 other locations across the region. Amara spread out a map, marking the 2 confirmed collapse sites. The pattern that emerged made his blood run cold. These locations, they're not random. Look. He drew lines connecting the points. If I'm right about the geographical references in the text, these collapses are happening at sites of ancient significance, places mentioned in pre-Islamic texts about the end times. 7 wounds, Layla whispered, understanding dawning in her eyes. If 2 have already opened, then we have even less time than I thought. Amara turned back to the manuscript, his mind racing. The custodians aren't just waiting for this prophecy to unfold, they're actively making it happen. They've had centuries to position themselves, to prepare. Marcus was already typing frantically. I'm pulling up satellite data for the other potential sites. If we can predict where the next collapse will occur, we might be able to stop it, Amara finished. But first we need to understand what's really happening here. The message in the Qur'an was a warning, but it was also instructions. Someone wanted future generations to know how to prevent this. He returned to the ancient text with renewed focus, this time looking not just at the words, but at the spaces between them, the way certain letters were formed, the subtle variations in the scribal hand. Slowly, a new pattern began to emerge. Layla, look at this. He pointed to what appeared to be random marks scattered throughout the text. What if these aren't scribal errors or age damage? What if they're intentional? She leaned over his shoulder, her expertise in ancient languages complementing his theological knowledge. You're right. These marks, they're forming their own message. Give me a moment to map them out. As she worked, Amara felt the weight of centuries pressing down on him. Somewhere out there, the custodians were moving closer to their goal, and the earth itself was beginning to convulse in response to forces beyond modern understanding. The race against prophecy had become something far more terrifying, a race against the deliberate awakening of something that should have remained buried forever. The ancient stone steps beneath the mosque felt different under Yusuf's feet as he descended into the crypts, each footfall echoing with the weight of centuries. Brother Hakim's lantern cast dancing shadows on walls that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, but tonight they seemed to whisper secrets that made Yusuf's skin crawl. The manuscripts are kept in the deepest chamber, Hakim murmured, his voice barely audible. Few have been permitted to see them, fewer still understand their significance. Behind them, Sarah's laptop bag bounced against her hip as she navigated the narrow staircase. The digital world she inhabited felt impossibly distant from these corridors where scribes had once labored by candlelight, preserving knowledge that powerful men would kill to possess. The air grew thicker as they descended, heavy with the scent of aged parchment and something else, something that reminded Yusuf of the hospital where his father had died. Fear, perhaps, or desperation. Tell me about the Guardians, Sarah said, breaking the oppressive silence. How long have they existed? Hakim paused at a heavy wooden door, his weathered hand resting on an iron key. Since the time of the Abbasid Caliphate. When the Mongols came for Baghdad, when the House of Wisdom burned, some saw what was coming. They scattered the most precious texts, created networks of protection that would outlast any single dynasty. The key turned with a grinding sound that seemed to echo from the tomb itself. Beyond the door lay a chamber that took Yusuf's breath away. Shelves lined every wall, reaching up into shadows that the lantern couldn't penetrate. Manuscripts wrapped in silk, bound in leather, some so old they seemed held together by prayer alone. But Guardianship breeds paranoia, Hakim continued, setting the lantern on a reading stand carved from a single piece of olive wood. When you spend generations protecting secrets, you begin to see threats everywhere. Some of us wondered if the real danger might come from within. Sarah was already moving between the shelves, her fingers hovering over texts that predated universities, that contained knowledge from when the Islamic world was the center of learning and innovation. These numerical patterns Yusuf found, they're not random, are they? Someone designed them to be discovered. The question, said a new voice from the doorway, is whether they were designed to be discovered now, or whether someone simply grew impatient. All three spun toward the entrance. A figure stepped into the lamplight, tall, wearing the simple robes of a scholar, but there was nothing simple about the intensity in his dark eyes or the way his presence seemed to fill the chamber. "Brother Khalil," Hakim breathed, and Yusuf caught the note of both relief and wariness in the old man's voice. "You weren't supposed to involve outsiders." Khalil's gaze fixed on Sarah, then shifted to Yusuf with an expression that was equal parts curiosity and calculation. Especially not him. "The timeline accelerated," Hakim said. "The patterns are manifesting faster than our calculations predicted. We needed expertise we didn't possess." Khalil moved deeper into the chamber, and Yusuf noticed how the man's fingers traced certain manuscript spines as he passed, like a pianist warming up before a performance. "Calculations. Yes, let's discuss those." He pulled a volume from the shelf, not one of the ancient texts, but something bound in modern leather. When he opened it, Yusuf saw pages covered in mathematical equations, computer printouts, and diagrams that looked disturbingly familiar. "Recognize these?" Khalil asked, holding up a page covered in the same numerical sequences that had kept Yusuf awake for the past week. "We've been tracking these patterns for longer than you might imagine. Not centuries, that would be impossible, but decades certainly." Sarah stepped forward, her phone already recording. "You've been using computers to analyze the Quranic text, looking for patterns that wouldn't have been visible to medieval scholars." "Very good, though 'we' is becoming an increasingly complicated term." Khalil's smile held no warmth. "The Guardians have always been fractured. Some believe in preservation above all else. Others believe that knowledge exists to be used." "Used for what?" Yusuf demanded, though part of him already dreaded the answer. "To prove that faith and science are not enemies. To demonstrate that divine revelation contains truths that human discovery will eventually confirm." Khalil's voice grew passionate, evangelical. "Imagine the impact. Mathematical proofs embedded in sacred text, predictions that come to pass exactly as foretold. It would revolutionize how the world sees Islam, sees revelation itself." Hakim was shaking his head. "By manufacturing a catastrophe? By manipulating events to fulfill a prophecy that was never meant as prediction?" "Sometimes," Khalil said quietly, "God needs assistance to make his will manifest." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop 10 degrees. Yusuf felt pieces clicking into place, the accelerating timeline, the two perfect mathematical progressions, the feeling that someone had been watching his research from the very beginning. "You've been guiding me," he whispered. "The fellowship, the research access, even Sarah." "Not Sarah," Khalil said. "That was an unexpected variable. But yes, Dr. Al-Rashid, you've been invaluable, though your part in this is nearly finished." The ancient stone steps beneath the mosque creaked as Yusuf descended into darkness, his phone's flashlight cutting through air thick with centuries of dust. Behind him, Layla's breathing echoed in the narrow passage, while ahead, the mysterious woman who called herself Sophia moved with unsettling familiarity through corridors that hadn't seen light in decades. "The Brotherhood of the Veil built these tunnels in the 13th century, Sophia explained, her voice carrying strangely in the confined space. "They knew this day would come. They prepared for it." Yusuf's mind reeled as they walked deeper underground. The hidden message in the Qur'an, the precise timing, the coordination of events across the globe, none of it was coincidence. Someone had orchestrated this moment for 700 years. "You said you've been waiting," Yusuf said, his voice tight with exhaustion and growing dread. "Waiting for what exactly?" Sophia paused at a junction where 3 tunnels converged. Ancient Arabic script covered the walls, illuminated by oil lamps that somehow still burned after centuries. For the chosen scholar to finally understand his purpose. The words hit Yusuf like a physical blow. "The chosen scholar? Did you think your discovery was accident? Your unique ability to see patterns others miss?" Sophia turned to face him, and in the flickering lamplight, her eyes seemed to hold depths of knowledge that made him uncomfortable. "Your bloodline was selected generations ago, Yusuf. You are the descendant of the original Brotherhood scribes." Layla stepped closer to Yusuf's side. "That's impossible. You're talking about predetermined destiny across centuries." "The impossible becomes inevitable when viewed through the lens of divine providence," Sophia replied, resuming her walk down the central tunnel. "The Brotherhood didn't just hide the message. They bred the key to unlock it." Yusuf's hands trembled as fragments of his family history suddenly made terrible sense. His grandfather's obsession with genealogy, his father's unexplained knowledge of obscure textual variations, the way certain passages had always seemed to call to him, demanding deeper investigation. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, its domed ceiling disappearing into shadow above their heads. Along the walls, thousands of manuscripts lay preserved in glass cases, while in the center stood a circular table carved from black stone. Upon it rested a single book, bound in midnight blue leather and emanating an aura of terrible significance. "Behold the true Codex of Hours," Sophia said, gesturing toward the tome, the original text from which all others were copied. "The source of the message that brought you here." Yusuf approached the table slowly, his academic instincts warring with a growing sense of cosmic dread. The book was ancient beyond measure, its pages yellowed with age yet perfectly preserved. As he drew near, he could see that the text seemed to shimmer slightly, as if the ink itself possessed some form of life. "What happens when I open it?" he asked. "You complete the prophecy," Sophia replied. "The final seal is broken and the cleansing begins." "Cleansing?" Layla's voice cracked with fear. "The corruption of the modern world, the abandonment of sacred wisdom, the pollution of divine truth, all of it will be washed away. A new age will dawn, purified and perfect." Yusuf's blood turned to ice as understanding crashed over him. The catastrophic event. "You're not trying to prevent it. You want it to happen." Sophia smiled, and the expression transformed her face into something alien and terrifying. For 7 centuries, the Brotherhood has guided history toward this moment. Wars, plagues, the rise and fall of empires, all were orchestrated to bring us to this precise convergence of time and circumstance. "You're insane," Layla whispered. "I am enlightened," Sophia corrected, "as Yusuf will be once he embraces his destiny." Yusuf stared at the ancient book, his mind racing through alternatives. Behind him, he could hear footsteps echoing from the tunnel, more Brotherhood members arriving to ensure the prophecy's completion. Around him, the weight of centuries pressed down like a physical force. "And if I refuse?" he asked. "You cannot refuse what you were born to fulfill," Sophia said. "The blood in your veins calls to the words on those pages. You feel it already. The compulsion, the certainty that this moment was always inevitable." She was right, and that knowledge terrified him more than anything else. Standing before the Codex, Yusuf could sense something stirring in his consciousness, a recognition that transcended rational thought. The ancient text seemed to pulse with his heartbeat, calling to him across the centuries. But as his hand moved toward the book's cover, one thought pierced through the supernatural compulsion. Somewhere above them, millions of innocent people went about their lives, unaware that their destruction had been planned for 700 years. The footsteps in the tunnel grew closer. Time was running out, and Yusuf faced an impossible choice: embrace his predetermined destiny or find some way to break a chain of events that had been forged across centuries of careful manipulation. His fingers hovered inches above the codex as the first robed figures emerged from the shadows. The ancient chamber beneath the dome of the rock felt like stepping into the throat of history itself. Dr. Yusuf Mansouri's flashlight beam carved through darkness that had remained undisturbed for centuries, revealing walls covered in intricate geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with hidden meaning. Behind him, Sarah Chen's breathing echoed in the confined space, while Imam Hassan moved with surprising agility for his age. "The air," Hassan whispered, his voice barely audible. "Can you feel it? There's something wrong here." Yusuf knew what he meant. The atmosphere felt charged, electric, as if the very stones were waiting for something to happen, according to his calculations. They had less than 6 hours before the prophesied event would unfold. The hidden message in the Qur'an had led them here, to this forgotten chamber that wasn't supposed to exist. Sarah's laptop provided the only modern light in the space, its glow illuminating her concentrated face as she worked to decode the symbols surrounding them. "These aren't just decorative," she said, her fingers tracing patterns in the air above her keyboard. "They're mathematical sequences, but unlike anything I've seen before." The walls told a story written in stone and precious metals inlaid with precision that defied the tools available centuries ago. Yusuf recognized elements of classical Arabic calligraphy interwoven with symbols that predated Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. This was older than any of them had imagined. "Look at this," Hassan called from the far corner, where his flashlight had found something that made Yusuf's blood run cold. A stone altar sat in the center of a 7-pointed star carved into the floor. Upon it lay a single object that shouldn't have been there, a modern tablet computer, its screen dark but clearly recently placed. Someone had been here before them. "It's still warm," Sarah said, her hand hovering over the device. "Someone was here within the last hour." The implications hit Yusuf like a physical blow. They weren't alone in this race against time. Whoever had orchestrated the hidden message, whoever had been waiting centuries for this moment, was still here, still watching. Hassan activated the tablet with trembling fingers. The screen blazed to life, revealing a single application running, a countdown timer showing 5 hours, 37 minutes and 18 seconds. Below it, a message in classical Arabic that made Yusuf's heart stop. "The faithful servant arrives as foretold. The key of Solomon awaits its final purpose." "The key of Solomon," Hassan breathed. "I thought it was lost forever." Yusuf knew the legends. King Solomon's seal said to grant power over jinn and men alike, control over the very forces of creation. But those were stories, myths told to children. They weren't supposed to be real. Sarah's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard, cross-referencing the chamber's dimensions with satellite imagery of the Temple Mount above. "The geometric patterns aren't just decorative," she said, her voice tight with discovery. "They're forming a massive resonance chamber. If someone activated the right frequency at the right time—" She didn't need to finish. Yusuf understood. The entire Temple Mount could be turned into a weapon, its destruction capable of triggering a war that would consume the entire Middle East and beyond. The hidden message hadn't been a warning, it had been an invitation. "We need to leave," Hassan said. But his words were cut short by the sound of footsteps echoing from the passage they'd used to enter. Yusuf grabbed the tablet while Sarah snapped photos of the wall symbols with desperate speed. The footsteps were getting closer, and with them came voices speaking in a language he recognized but wished he didn't, the formal Arabic of religious ceremony, the kind used for the most sacred and dangerous rituals. There, Hassan pointed to a narrow opening in the far wall that Yusuf's flashlight had missed. "It leads to the old Solomonic tunnels. We can reach the surface through the western wall plaza." They moved quickly but quietly, Sarah clutching her laptop while Yusuf studied the countdown timer. 5 hours and 23 minutes. The numbers seemed to pulse with malevolent purpose, each second bringing them closer to catastrophe. The tunnel Hassan led them through was older than the chamber they'd fled, its walls bearing carvings that belonged to no known civilization. Yusuf realized with growing horror that the conspiracy they'd uncovered wasn't merely centuries old. It was ancient beyond measure, predating recorded history. Behind them, lights began to fill the chamber they'd abandoned. Whoever was following them had arrived at their destination, and from the sounds echoing through the stone passages, they were beginning some kind of ceremony. The countdown continued its relentless march toward zero, and Yusuf knew that whatever was about to happen in that chamber would determine the fate of millions. The hidden message in the Qur'an hadn't been a prophecy. It had been a summons calling the faithful to witness the end of everything they held sacred. The ancient stones beneath the mosque trembled as Dr. Yusuf Malik descended deeper into the catacombs, his flashlight cutting through darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. Behind him, the footsteps of his pursuers echoed off the walls, growing closer with each passing second. The weight of the decoded message pressed against his chest, where he'd hidden the parchment. Less than 6 hours remained before the prophecy reached its fulfillment. Sarah Chen's voice crackled through his earpiece, distorted by the interference of centuries-old stone and metal. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts down there, Yusuf. Whatever they've built, it's been charging for a very long time. He pressed forward through a narrow corridor lined with symbols that predated Islam by millennia, yet somehow perfectly complemented the Quranic verses he'd been studying. The deeper truth was becoming clear. This wasn't about religious prophecy at all. Someone had been manipulating sacred texts across multiple faiths, weaving a tapestry of belief that would culminate in this moment. A gunshot rang out behind him, the bullet ricocheting off stone inches from his head. Malik quickened his pace, following the strange pull he felt drawing him deeper into the earth. The air grew warmer, and a low humming sound began to vibrate through his bones. "The magnetic field is intensifying." Sarah's voice was barely audible now. "I'm reading massive energy buildups beneath your position. Yusuf, you need to find the source and shut it down before—" The transmission cut to static. Malik emerged into a vast underground chamber that defied architectural logic. The space stretched impossibly wide, supported by pillars carved with equations that wouldn't be discovered by mainstream science for another century. In the center stood a device that seemed part ancient artifact, part modern technology, a crystalline structure surrounded by copper rings and strange metallic components that hummed with barely contained power. "Magnificent, isn't it?" The voice came from the shadows near the far wall. Professor Hassan al-Zahrani stepped into the light, but his familiar face now carried an expression of terrible purpose. 800 years of preparation, and you arrive exactly when the calculations predicted you would. "Hassan?" Malik's voice echoed his disbelief. "You're behind this?" "Behind it? My dear friend, I am merely the latest guardian of something far greater than either of us." Al-Zahrani moved closer to the device, his hand resting on an ornate control panel. The Brotherhood of the Final Hour has tended this moment across generations. We've guided scholars, influenced translations, planted clues, all to ensure the right person would be here when the celestial alignment reached its peak. The humming grew louder, and Malik could see energy beginning to arc between the copper rings. "This isn't prophecy, it's engineering. You've been manipulating people's faith to save humanity from itself," Al-Zahrani interrupted. "The ancient ones who built this understood what we've forgotten. Sometimes destruction is the only path to true enlightenment. The electromagnetic pulse this device will generate won't just disable technology. It will reset human civilization, force us back to what matters." Malik edged closer, studying the device's construction. The mathematical principles were elegant but horrifying, a controlled magnetic reversal that would cascade across the planet's electromagnetic field, destroying every electronic device and plunging the world into chaos. Millions would die in the resulting collapse of infrastructure, medicine, and communication. "The verses you've been studying aren't prophecy," Al-Zahrani continued, his finger hovering over what looked like an activation sequence. They're an instruction manual written by those who survived the last Great Reset 3,000 years ago. They built this as both warning and tool, trusting that when humanity again grew too dependent on its machines, someone would understand. And the other sites, London, Cairo, Mumbai, decoys. Necessary misdirection to ensure the real location remained hidden until this moment. Al-Zarani smiled coldly. Even your friend Dr. Chen is chasing shadows. This chamber has been shielded from detection for centuries. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the corridor. Armed figures in black tactical gear emerged from multiple entrances surrounding the chamber. But their weapons weren't aimed at Malik. They were protecting the device. You've served your purpose, Yusuf. Your analysis confirmed our calculations were correct. The magnetic field alignment is perfect, the solar activity optimal. In exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes, when the planets achieve the precise configuration detailed in the ancient texts, we will initiate humanity's rebirth. Malik's mind raced through possibilities. The device was too complex to simply destroy, and he was outnumbered 20-1. But something in the mathematical equations carved into the pillars caught his attention, a variable that Al-Zarani seemed to have overlooked. "Hassan," he said carefully, "show me the resonance calculations one more time. I think there might be an error in the harmonic frequency." Al-Zarani's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but scholarly pride won over caution. As he turned toward the control panel to display the readings, Malik prepared to make the most desperate gamble of his life. The ancient chamber beneath the Al-Azhar Mosque stretched before them like a cathedral of secrets. Dr. Yusuf Hassan's flashlight beam danced across walls covered in Arabic calligraphy that seemed to pulse with otherworldly energy. The air hung thick with centuries of dust and something else, anticipation. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Amira Nazir, her voice echoing in the vast space. "These texts predate the mosque by at least 2 centuries. Hassan moved deeper into the chamber, his heart hammering against his ribs. The hidden message from the Qur'an had led them here, but now he understood they weren't the first to make this journey. Fresh footprints in the dust told a different story. "Someone's been here recently," he muttered, kneeling to examine the tracks. Multiple sets, all leading toward the far end of the chamber where shadows swallowed his flashlight beam. A low chuckle emanated from the darkness ahead. Hassan and Amira froze as a figure stepped into the light, an elderly man in pristine white robes, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Dr. Hassan," the man said, his voice carrying a strange accent that seemed to blend Arabic dialects from across centuries. "I am Ibn Masara. We have been waiting so very long for you to arrive." "That's impossible," Hassan breathed. Ibn Masara died in 931 CE. The man smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too white, too perfect. "Death is merely another veil to be lifted, Doctor, just as you have lifted the veil on our sacred message." More figures emerged from the shadows, men and women of various ages, all wearing the same timeless white robes, all bearing that same unsettling smile. Hassan counted at least a dozen before losing track in the shifting darkness. "The guardians of the hidden word," Amira whispered, her face pale. "The heretical sect that claimed to possess secret knowledge. They were supposed to be extinct." "Extinct?" Ibn Masara laughed, the sound echoing off the ancient walls. "We have been preparing, Dr. Hassan. For over 1,000 years, we have waited for the stars to align, for the hidden message to reveal itself to one pure enough of heart and brilliant enough of mind to unlock its secrets." Hassan's hand instinctively moved to the encrypted phone in his pocket, but Ibn Masara shook his head. "Your government friends cannot help you here, Doctor. This chamber exists outside their understanding, outside their reach. Here, only the ancient laws apply." "What do you want?" Hassan demanded, fighting to keep his voice steady. "What we have always wanted, to complete the great work." Ibn Masara gestured toward the far wall, where Hassan now saw an intricate geometric pattern carved into the stone. At its center sat a depression shaped like a hand. The catastrophic event you've been so desperately trying to prevent is not a disaster, Doctor. It is a transformation. The earthquake, Amira said, understanding dawning in her eyes. You're going to trigger it. The earth remembers, Dr. Nazir, the convergence of sacred geometry, astronomical alignment, and spiritual resonance, all coming together at the precise moment foretold in the hidden message. When Dr. Hassan places his hand upon the seal, the transformation will begin. Hassan backed away, shaking his head. I won't do it. I won't be part of destroying innocent lives. Destroying? Ibn Masara's expression grew patient, almost pitying. Doctor, you still think in such limited terms. The old world must be shattered for the new one to emerge. The earthquake will crack open the earth itself, releasing energies that have been dormant since the time of the Prophet. Those worthy of the new age will survive and be elevated. The rest, he shrugged eloquently. The other guardians began to move, forming a circle around Hassan and Amira. Their footsteps made no sound on the stone floor, as if they barely existed in the physical world. You have 6 hours until the astronomical alignment reaches its peak, Ibn Masara continued. You can place your hand willingly upon the seal, embracing your role in the great work, or we can make the choice for you. Either way, the prophecy will be fulfilled. Hassan's mind raced through possibilities, escape routes, ways to signal for help, but the chamber felt increasingly disconnected from the world above, as if they had stepped outside of normal reality entirely. There's something you haven't considered, Hassan said suddenly, his voice gaining strength. The hidden message. I wasn't the only one who could decode it. I've shared my methods, my findings. Others will follow the same path. Ibn Masara's smile faltered for just a moment. Impossible. The message reveals itself only to the chosen one. Then you don't understand the message as well as you think you do. Hassan took a step forward, using the Guardian's moment of uncertainty. What if the catastrophe isn't meant to happen? What if the prophecy is actually a warning about people like you? The ancient chamber fell silent except for the distant sound of Hassan's phone buzzing insistently in his pocket. The ancient stone beneath Dr. Rashid's feet trembled as the mechanical grinding grew louder. Deep within the hidden chamber beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque, shadows danced against walls covered in inscriptions that predated Islam by millennia. The air itself seemed to pulse with malevolent energy as the countdown on his phone showed less than 3 hours remaining. You're too late, Doctor. The voice echoed from the darkness ahead, cultured and calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. Brother Matthias emerged from behind a massive stone pillar, his white robes now stained with dust and something darker. The seal of Solomon has already begun to crack. Rashid's breath caught as he saw what lay behind the man. A circular stone formation dominated the chamber's center, covered in Hebrew, Arabic, and symbols that seemed to shift and writhe in the flickering torchlight. Hairline fractures spread across its surface like a spider's web, each new crack releasing a sound like breaking glass mixed with distant screaming. The jinn, Rashid whispered, understanding flooding through him. You're trying to release them. Matthias smiled, the expression cold and alien on his weathered face. Not trying, Doctor, succeeding. For 8 centuries my order has prepared for this moment. The hidden message you discovered in the Qur'an wasn't a warning, it was an invitation. The phone in Rashid's pocket buzzed frantically. Sarah's voice crackled through the static-filled connection. Rashid, the seismic readings are off the charts. Whatever's happening down there, it's affecting the entire region. Jerusalem, Mecca, even Rome, they're all detecting tremors. Matthias's smile widened. Your student understands the scope, even if she doesn't comprehend the purpose. When the seal breaks completely, the boundaries between the physical and spiritual realms will shatter. The jinn will be free to reclaim what was theirs before Solomon bound them. Rashid took a step closer, his mind racing through everything he'd learned. The prophecy spoke of a choice, light or darkness, preservation or destruction. This isn't inevitable, isn't it? Matthias gestured toward the cracking seal. Look around you, Doctor. This chamber exists beneath one of Islam's holiest sites, built upon the foundation of Solomon's temple, where Christ himself walked. 3 faiths, 1 location, all connected by threads older than recorded history. When the jinn emerge here, their influence will spread through every sacred space on earth. Another crack split the air, and the seal's fractures deepened. Through the gaps, Rashid could see something moving, shadows that writhed with their own life, pressing against the weakening stone barrier. The temperature in the chamber plummeted, and frost began forming on the ancient walls. "The Brotherhood of the Hidden Flame," Rashid said, pieces clicking into place. "You've been manipulating religious conflicts for centuries, haven't you? Crusades, sectarian violence, anything to weaken faith and prepare for this moment." Matthias nodded approvingly. "Faith is a powerful force, Doctor, but doubt is far more useful. Every crisis of belief, every moment when believers questioned their purpose, we were there, nurturing that uncertainty, weakening the spiritual foundations that help maintain the seal." Sarah's voice burst through the phone again, urgent and panicked. "Rashid, I've been analyzing the electromagnetic readings. There's a pattern. It's like something is trying to synchronize with sacred sites worldwide. If this continues, the resonance could—" The line went dead as another massive crack split the seal. This time, something definitely moved in the darkness beyond. Something vast and patient and filled with ancient rage. Rashid pulled out the original Quranic manuscript, its pages glowing faintly in the supernatural cold. "You're wrong about the message. It wasn't an invitation, it was a key, a way to strengthen the seal, not break it. Impossible. We've studied those verses for—" "You studied them through the lens of your own agenda," Rashid interrupted, opening the manuscript to the hidden text. "But you missed the counterpoint. Every prophecy of darkness contains within it the seed of light." He began to recite the hidden verses, but not as Matthias had taught him to read them. Instead, he spoke them as they were meant to be heard, as a prayer of binding, a renewal of Solomon's ancient work. His voice echoed through the chamber, and the seal's cracking slowed. Matthias lunged forward, but Rashid was ready. Years of academic study hadn't prepared him for physical combat, but desperation lent him strength. They grappled beside the seal as otherworldly howls rose from the depths below. "You don't understand what you're doing," Matthias snarled, his cultured facade finally cracking. "Humanity needs to evolve beyond these primitive faiths. The jinn offer power, knowledge, freedom from spiritual constraints. They offer slavery," Rashid gasped, still clutching the manuscript. "Slavery dressed as liberation." The seal gave another ominous crack, and suddenly Sarah's voice reached them, not through the phone, but echoing down from the chamber entrance. She'd found them. Time was running out, and Rashid realized that strengthening the seal would require more than words. It would require sacrifice. The ancient chamber beneath the Hagia Sophia trembled as Dr. Khalil Abbas pressed his palm against the crystalline surface of the Byzantine relic. The moment his skin made contact, the artifact blazed with ethereal light, and the hidden message from the Qur'an materialized in the air before him, each Arabic letter burning like fire against the darkness. "You're too late, Doctor," came a voice from the shadows. Marcus Valentinus stepped into the chamber, no longer the mild-mannered antiquities dealer Khalil had trusted. His eyes held the weight of centuries, and his smile carried the satisfaction of a plan finally reaching fruition. "Do you know how long I've waited for this moment? How many lifetimes I've spent preparing?" Khalil's hand remained on the crystal, feeling its power pulse through his veins. "You're the descendant, the one the prophecy warned about." "Descendant," Marcus laughed, the sound echoing off the ancient walls. "My dear scholar, I am no descendant. I am the original, the same Marcus Valentinus who discovered this relic in 537 CE, who learned its secrets, who has walked this earth for 15 centuries, waiting for the alignment to return." The revelation hit Khalil like a physical blow. The man before him wasn't just connected to the conspiracy, he was its architect, its patient guardian across the ages. Impossible. "You're human." The crystal changed me, preserved me, gave me purpose. Marcus moved closer, his footsteps deliberate and predatory. I've watched empires rise and fall, seen the Islamic Golden Age flourish and fade, all while protecting this secret. The message you discovered wasn't a warning, Doctor. It was an invitation. Above them, the sounds of chaos echoed through Istanbul's streets. The 24 hours had nearly elapsed, and Khalil could feel reality itself beginning to fray at the edges. The prophecy wasn't just predicting catastrophe, it was the key to unleashing it. The message speaks of unity, Khalil said, his voice steady despite the terror clawing at his chest. Of bringing together the faithful of all three Abrahamic faiths. You've perverted its meaning. Marcus shook his head. I've fulfilled its true purpose. The crystal responds to belief, to faith so pure it transcends human understanding. For centuries I've orchestrated conflicts between Christians, Muslims and Jews, ensuring their faiths would burn bright with passion when the moment came. Tonight, as they gather in their holy places, the Dome of the Rock, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Western Wall, their combined devotion will power a transformation you cannot imagine. The crystal pulsed brighter, and Khalil saw flashes of Marcus's plan, hidden artifacts placed in each sacred site, all connected to this master relic. The faithful gathering in prayer, unknowingly feeding their spiritual energy into an ancient network designed to reshape reality itself. You want to become a god, Khalil whispered. I want to become the bridge, Marcus corrected. The living embodiment of divine will, speaking with the voice of Abraham, Moses, Jesus and Muhammad. Imagine it. No more sectarian violence, no more religious war. One faith, one voice, one truth flowing through me for all eternity. Khalil felt the crystal's seductive pull, its promise of power and purpose. For a moment, he understood the terrible appeal of Marcus's vision. But then he thought of his daughter Layla, of the countless innocents who would be consumed in this transformation, and his resolve hardened. Free will, he said quietly. Faith without choice isn't faith at all. It's slavery. With those words, Khalil pressed both hands against the crystal and spoke the counterverse he'd discovered in his research. Not the hidden message that had started this nightmare, but its opposite, a safeguard hidden even deeper in the sacred text. The Arabic words flowed from his lips like water, each syllable charged with genuine faith and human love. Marcus screamed as the crystal's light shifted from gold to silver, its energy pattern reversing. The ancient network he'd spent centuries building began to collapse, the artifacts in Jerusalem going dark one by one. You don't understand what you're destroying. Marcus lunged forward, but the crystal's changing energy created a barrier between them. I've seen the future, Doctor. I've seen the wars that are coming, the suffering that awaits. My way would have ended all of that. By ending humanity itself, Khalil replied, his voice growing stronger as the counterverse reached its climax. Some prices are too high to pay, even for peace. The crystal cracked, hairline fractures spreading across its surface. Marcus's immortal form began to shimmer and fade as the source of his supernatural longevity failed. 15 centuries of borrowed time were demanding their due. This isn't over, Marcus gasped, his voice already growing distant. The prophecy